I had to think about it, as I cannot say that I had a pivotal moment in my life as a time that I can say that my faith started. I would say that my faith has been a slow and steady process. As a child, I was brought up in a Christian home. My mom would bring us kids to church on a fairly consistent basis. We participated in Sunday school, and I did go to camp a couple times in my younger teenage years. But outside of church, faith was not talked about. I would say that my faith as a child was an underlying factor of who I was, and as I left home for college and started my young adult years, my faith became stronger and more important in my life. I was going to community college in Fergus Falls, and that is where I met my husband, Dave. We married when I finished my degree, and shortly after we moved to Brainerd, as we both loved the water and we were centrally located between our families. Dave's background was in construction, and his dream was to have a cabinet business. Dave had gotten a job with a contractor when we moved to Brainerd. He started in the field and soon became a foreman and eventually was promoted to project manager at this growing and well-established construction company. Things were going along. We had 2 children. I was working in my field as a lab tech, and we were becoming pretty stable. Yet both of us knew what Dave's dream was. My education was a degree in medical lab field, but I had always had a desire for accounting. So with his dream and my desires, I decided to take some business and accounting classes. It was 1991, and we were living in our first home. Our kids were 4 and 6. This is a year, if I'd have to pick one, that I'd say was a pivotal moment in my faith. Dave was becoming more determined to start his business, yet it was hard as his job was stable and he was being paid well. Kids were starting school. Why would we upset the apple cart? I just was not comfortable in taking that leap of starting a business. One night, I had a dream. This dream was very vivid, and I still can remember it today as if it was last night. I was in a car with my brother-in-law, Jerry, who's Dave's oldest brother, and he had started a cabinet business a few years prior in Wisconsin. So Jerry and I were driving down a country road, and we were talking. However, the only words I remember Jerry saying to me was, "Go ahead and don't look back." This was such a strong message in that dream, and I remember waking up, and I knew those words were not from Jerry, but they were from God, and a message for Dave and I to move forward with his cabinet business. Shortly after that, Dave and I had a conversation about starting the business. I told him my dream, and our business was established in April of 1992. He continued to work for the construction company for a short time while he started the business. Finally, he decided to leave the construction company and go into business full-time. We both remember that. When he left that job, he didn't have any jobs for cabinets at all. Here we were, 2 kids. I had a part-time job with no benefits, and we had a house payment, and we had no work. Wow, did we totally miss it? Was that dream I had from Satan? But all that could play in my mind was, go ahead and don't look back. Well, we made it, and shortly after, we moved the business out of our garage and built our first shop. Moving forward, business was good. We continued to grow, and the building industry in this area was flourishing. In 2004, we became landlocked, and we were faced with either downsizing or relocating. We decided to build a new shop and more than doubled our space. Business was good. We had 20 employees, and life was treating us well. Well, 2008 hit, and the nation was feeling the economy go down, and it was the beginning of the recession. We were doing fine. Business had slowed, but but we were really not feeling what others were saying. I was okay with it and just thought, it's just a hiccup. Things will change in about a year. Well, it got tougher in 2009. My thoughts were, it'll change. We have to be at the bottom. We had worked with the Small Business Development Center since the beginning of our business, and we had called them and said we wanted to meet with a consultant to work through this downtime. I can remember having a meeting with 3 consultants in December, and they said we needed to do a layoff. I said, I can't do that right now. It's Christmas. It's not the right time. They said, if you don't, you will not be in business. You have no choice. So right before Christmas, Dave and I had to lay off employees that had been with us for many years. Why would God let this happen? How can I tell these men and their families that they do not have a job, especially knowing that it would be tough getting a job? That was one of the hardest things I had to do. We went from 20 employees to 5 employees in about 2.5 years. While the recession continued, and we were muddling along, but it was tough. I remember days of going into work, sitting at my desk, and being paralyzed by fear. I didn't know what I should do, and I had never felt financial crisis like this. It was my faith and prayers that got me through day to day. I remember one day sitting at my desk, knowing that I couldn't make payroll. We had receivables, but customers were slow to pay as everyone was dealing with tight finances. I prayed that God would provide me with a specific amount of money so that I wouldn't have to tell my employees that I can't pay them. I walked out to the mailbox later that day, and do you know that I received checks in the mail that day almost to the penny of what I needed for payroll? God did not fail me. This is when I knew that God will get us through this recession and that He was in control. Dave and I struggled, but we were making it. However, not only were we dealing with the recession, our marriage was strained. Where would I be if I decided to leave Dave? What would I do? Also, what happens if the business doesn't make it and we both would be without income? This is when I decided to take a look for another job, not only if our business didn't make it, but seriously thinking our marriage was not going to make it either. I interviewed at a large resort. However, I knew when I left that interview that I blew it. A couple days later, I'd seen an ad for a financial secretary at a church in Deerwood. I thought, I'll apply, but I didn't know that I really wanted to go to Deerwood. What would be there? That was no man's land to me. I got called in for an interview, and I'm driving to Deerwood thinking the whole time, why would I be interested in a job in Deerwood? I did the interview and was called back for a second interview. After I left that interview, I was a little more excited about the job, but I wasn't really sure. I got a call from Pastor Dave, and he offered me the job. I accepted, but in my mind I was thinking, what did I just do? Well, you see, Salem was a part of God's plan, not financially, but through the people I work with at Salem, and you as a congregation, through your commitment, faith, and love, has shown me so much about faith. Even you Lutherans can make a Methodist grow in her faith. The last 5 years have brought me through the valley of darkness. I can say that our business and marriage are stronger and growing, but the most important is how my faith has grown. Still today, those words from the dream, go ahead and don't look back, stay with me in many situations. I take those words to mean don't look back on what could have or may have been, but to be content to where I am today. I do have to say I do look back, and I'm amazed on the path that God has taken me on. As I look back on this journey, it brings to mind the poem Footprints in the Sand. As there are many times that there are 2 sets of footprints in the sand, one belonging to me and the other to Jesus. But as the poem states, there are times I look back and see one set of footprints, and they are during the valleys of my life or when I'm wandering in the wilderness. And truly, this is the time that Jesus is carrying me. It is during this time that I am the most intimate with Jesus, and it is during this time I learn the most of who I am, and more importantly, of who Jesus is. So I encourage you, when you are in the valley or in the wilderness, to see how Jesus takes care of you, and do not look back and say, I wish I would have or I should have, but to look back and see the beauty of God's love as He carries you through. The scripture that I wanted to share with you tonight is from Psalm 34, 4-7 in the New Living Translation. I prayed to the Lord, and He answered me. He freed me from all my fears. Those who look to Him for help will be radiant with joy. No shadow of shame will darken their faces. In my desperation I prayed, and the Lord listened. He saved me from all my troubles. For the angel of the Lord is a guard. He surrounds and defends all who fear Him.